and welcome to the Arizona Association for Economic Development's Northern Summit. We have some really great speakers and some good presentations for you today. We're going to be speaking mainly about Arizona's energy growth and the rising demands and what some of us are doing to combat those rising demands and try to make Arizona a better place for business. So I'd like to start by just taking a moment to thank our event sponsors. Without our sponsors, this wouldn't be possible. So I wanted to say thank you first to our title sponsor, which is the Arizona Data Center Alliance, and then our session sponsors, which is the City of Flagstaff, the City of Winslow, Colliers Engineering and Design, Goldman York, Property Advisors, Terracon, and the City of Prescott Valley. And then right before we get started, I wanted to please take a moment to allow our title sponsor with the Arizona Data Center Alliance to say a few words. I think Kirk Bush is on the line. Kirk, you can go ahead if you're ready.
Welcome. Thank you. I'd like to thank everybody and honored to be the title sponsor for the Arizona Data Center Alliance for this event. The Arizona Data Center Alliance is a group of datacenter.orgs, economic development.orgs, and a whole bunch of stakeholders promoting data center adoption, jobs, STEM jobs, and everything else in the space and energy projects. We also produce the AI Data Center Summit, and we appreciate this opportunity to help facilitate this process for Arizona. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kirk, and we appreciate your sponsorship and your partnership with AAED. So we'll go ahead and get right into it. We got a packed 3 hours here, and I'd like to start by welcoming the chairman of the Arizona Corporation Commission, Nick Myers, to provide an overview of the ACA's role for Arizona. And if I'm not mistaken, I think, Katie, you're going to be helping out with the questions, correct?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Hurst, and I'm the CEO of the Arizona Association for Economic Development. We are a membership association for economic development professionals across the state. I'm here to talk to Nick Myers, who is the chairman of the Arizona Corporation Commission. He was elected to the commission in 2022 and brings a background in software engineering, entrepreneurship, and regulatory advocacy, particularly from his own personal experience. So he is the first commissioner elected from Pinal County. And so I'm really pleased to get a chance to talk with him today. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can feature Mr. Myers. And Mr. Myers, lovely to see you. How are you doing today, sir?
Doing well. Thank you for having me.
So I was hoping many of our economic developers may not engage with the ACC on a day-to-day basis. So I was kind of hoping you could just start by describing what is the commission's role in shaping Arizona's business and investment climate.
Yeah, so that's a very loaded question, obviously. I like to say that our core responsibility, 98% of what we do is regulate utilities in Arizona. And that's private utilities, not municipalities or anything that's regulated by a city or anything. And the other, I guess, 2% is we regulate securities. So if Bernie Madoff were to be in Arizona, we would have been the body that prosecuted him. Railroad and pipeline safety. So if a car and a train trade paint, we're the investigative body for that. If a pipeline explosion occurs, kind of like what happened in Coolidge a couple of years ago, that was under our jurisdiction. We also regulate corporations' filings. So, any business that wants to do business besides like a sole proprietorship kind of thing that doesn't require much, they will file a paperwork with the Corporation Commission, and our jurisdiction there is really just kind of a big filing cabinet. We don't really have a whole lot of authority over the businesses other than facilitating mostly LLCs. A lot of the C Corps and things of that nature are done at the Secretary of State level, but we do have a lot of the filing capabilities, and we do a little bit of telecom still. So that was largely deregulated in the 90s, but we still, constitutionally still have a little bit of authority over some of the kind of the backbone infrastructure there. So
when it breaks down to, if you were to do like a percentage breakdown, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, so for economic development, obviously the big chunk that we have is in the utilities regulation. We and like I said, you asked about percentages, but 98% of what we deal with is the utilities. We have the major electric companies, APS, TEP, UNS. We do not regulate SRP. They're a whole separate beast because they were established before we were even a state. We regulate over 210 or something water companies in the state still, some gas companies, Southwest Gas, and some others that have pipe in the ground. So we do a lot of that, but the big majority of what we end up talking about on a day-to-day basis is electricity and how do we serve the growth that's coming. Water and gas are not exempt from those same conversations because, you know, we have the Data Center Alliance here. They take all three. So it's very much a tight-knit discussion, but our economic role is largely in providing that stability, so stability in the regulatory environment, stability in grid services. You know, we want those grids to be reliable. And if we can provide those kinds of stable services for Arizona, that invites economic growth. So it's a very important part.
So you lead very naturally into the next question, which I know is a tenuous one, which is we are experiencing explosive population growth, explosive economic growth. How do you balance that pressure of keeping the rates affordable against the massive capital investment that is needed to build out our grid infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that not just Arizona is dealing with, but the entire nation is dealing with because of, you know, AI and data centers. They are just absolutely phenomenally expanding right now, and it's an exciting time to be in the energy industry. I have to admit, I guess I feel blessed that I'm the one that gets to deal with this, but it is a challenge, right? You've got data centers that are coming online. Used to be they would be 5 to 30 megawatts. You would fit within the planning margins of what the utility had, so they could pretty much be served readily, and then build, you know, more reserve margins later. Now you've got data centers coming online that are 300 megawatts for the first phase. The grid wasn't ever set up to deal with that. You know, it's our job to figure out, well, how are we going to do that? How are we going to pay for it? And a lot of that comes down to a policy that in some respects, Arizona has done in minimal ways for a long time, and that is growth should pay for itself. In other respects, that hasn't actually been the case because you've got transmission costs, you've got, you know, substations, transformers, all these things that go up to FERC and then have to be passed back down. And typically, you know, the last mile of service would be free. Well, you're now talking transmission lines and things like that typically you don't serve in normal or you don't deal with in normal population growth scenarios. So now the discussion has to be, all right, well, how do we make sure all of those costs are encapsulated in that project so that project can pay for its share and not pass costs to the residential and small business. And I think generally across the nation, that message is getting out. And, you know, I've been all over the country talking about this stuff, and it's really starting to take hold. And I think even data centers are starting to get the message that they're going to need to pay for it. And to be a good neighbor, maybe they have to do a little bit more. And that works well because now we can go back to the residents and say, no, this data center is not necessarily an enemy. They are now a friend. They're lowering your utility rates. They're not using the water that they used to use. In the desert, you don't have the water. People are concerned about that. It's a very big political hot button. Whether you have the water or not, it's a political nightmare. So having those discussions with the data centers to do closed loop cooling and things like that, all of that stuff is really where the discussions are headed. But that just means it's more energy requirements and more potential growth in the energy world. So yeah, having those discussions about growth should pay for itself, cost causers should be the cost payers. Those are really the big discussions right now. But I think it boils down to, can we get them online quickly? And that's where the trade-offs are really happening.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that you're speaking about this not only across the state, but across the United States. Looking at the different parts of Arizona, specifically, this is the Northern Summit, so we have a lot of folks from Northern Arizona. Are the conversations you're having in various communities across the state different? Are the questions you're getting different? Are the arguments or frustrations you're getting different? And what do you see as the similarities or differences across the various regions in the state?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's very similar.
Mhm.
There are obviously going to be geographic differences and things like that, but you're having the same conversations. Is this going to raise my bill? Is this going to suck my well dry? Is this going to be in my backyard? Right. So all of the conversations across really not just our state, but across the country are very, very similar in those respects. And I mean, you may have minimal differences here and there because some municipalities are more friendly to certain types of growth and whether it be data centers or TSMCs or, the large semiconductor manufacturers or steel manufacturing plants. East Mesa is way different than the Glendale area, which is way different than Flagstaff, right? But those are all just minor, kind of zoning differences more than anything. The discussions we have are largely very similar that covers those topics.
Mhm. And you also, I would imagine you all are looking for best practices and ideas wherever you can find them. Have you seen any communities or communities outside of Arizona that are doing innovative things that you all have decided we need to look more into, or these are things that we want to consider discussing at our state level?
Uh, you know, um, Oddly or surprisingly, I guess Arizona's actually been more of a leader in this.
Mm.
Other states are starting to take notice of what we're doing, and they like that model. Now, we just had a large load workshop that brought a whole bunch of people in to discuss, well, how should this be done, right? And this is getting stakeholders, this is getting the customers, this is getting the utilities and the regulators all in the same room and talking about, well, what's the right way to handle this? Because we need to have some stability and some confidence in the rate structures and everything, but also because the large load that's coming in they're very different from one to the next. One may be a lot more flexible and can have curtailment. Another one may not be able to, but they've got batteries so that when there's peak time, we can maybe draw that and put it back into the grid, or maybe they've got excess generation if they're co-locating. There's a whole lot of differences there that we need to be able to account for. And so I think one of the best practices you're starting to see emerge is having a tariff that defines how the electric should be, the pricing and how it should be structured. But then at the same time, you've got an energy services agreement that's layered on top of that. And what that does is provide the flexibility for those individual customers. And you're starting to see various models of that across the United States that are starting to come out. But you still got in Arizona, you still got some companies that are experimenting. For example, APS has their subscription model they've been talking about, where they're going to go build a 2 gigawatt natural gas power plant, and then they're going to sell subscriptions to that to large loads. So if somebody wants to come in and say they need a gigawatt of power, they pay for that prorated share of that generation cost and the transmission cost and everything, but it's all wrapped up into one 2 gigawatt generating facility. They just take a portion of it and then they can sell multiple portions. So that's an idea that's been thrown out there that people are experimenting with. Whether it takes hold or not, I don't know. But largely, I think what you're seeing for a trend is that tariff structure with an ESA on top of it.
And you mentioned natural gas. So we have a portfolio of lots of different energy sources that we will be hearing from some of those folks today. Could you lay out a little bit of what is our energy portfolio and where does the ACC see our energy portfolio going in the next decade, 20 years?
Sure. We have a nice mix right now of generation types. We've got wind, we've got solar, we've got natural gas, nuclear, coal. Now, a lot of the coal plants, as everybody knows, are scheduled to shut down regardless of what the administration says. Coal is expensive. But we've recently approved conversion of those coal plants to natural gas. So not only does it does make them cleaner, so substantially cleaner, actually, but also we've got the new natural gas pipeline that was recently announced from Texas and the Permian Basin all the way over to Phoenix, basically. And what that does is it's bringing in a whole lot of gas, which allows conversion of those plants to natural gas, and it allows more new natural gas to be built. The reason that's important is because natural gas is a dispatchable, can be a base load type generation source, whereas renewables, for all the benefits they bring, they just aren't that type of technology. They're great to have when the sun's shining and the wind's blowing and your battery banks are full and, you know, things of that nature. But batteries are not generation sources. They simply store it and release it. And you have the unpredictability of the weather. So you have to have that other generation to kind of back it up. But those can be balanced. I think what you're going to see in the next decade or so is a lot more nuclear coming online. So, you know, Georgia just went through and put in 2 new AP1000s for Plant Vogtle. And actually, Georgia took away a title from Arizona. We had the largest nuclear power plant in the country, and now we don't. So we have to, you know, figure out how we're going to get that back. But we still have the only nuclear power plant that's not by a body of water, though. So that's an interesting tidbit in the desert. But I think you're going to see maybe those AP1000s become a lot more commonplace. They're becoming a lot more commercially viable thanks to Georgia funding it. The first couple of ones, you're seeing dozens of them around the world being installed, and you're going to start seeing utilities planning for that long-term nuclear, but you're not going to see that probably for 10 years or so, maybe more. You'll see small modular reactors. They're brand new technology that the tech companies are building or are partnering with companies to build. And you may start seeing those pop up sooner at the data centers or wherever to be a co-located generation source. And so once a few of those are built, you'll start seeing a lot of those start to come online even at our utilities probably. So I suspect a lot of this natural gas generation is more of a stepping stone to a more permanent, cleaner energy source like nuclear and battery technology is advancing very quickly. I think you're going to start seeing more of that. That's a good thing because all that solar and wind that we've got, it needs to be controlled, and battery sources are the way to do that. Pumped hydro, you're seeing SRP starting to put in more pumped hydro. They got one basin they're working on. You'll see that in probably 8 to 10 years, I would guess. And they've got another one lined up behind it. So pumped hydro is a great mechanical battery type of storage. Iron air batteries are a brand new technology that people are starting to invest in heavily. They're long-term energy duration. So I think you're going to see a lot of explosive growth in the technologies for energy, and you're going to see a lot of changing in the next 10 years. But it's the fundamental concept that the commission has is we're an all of the above. You know, we like the all of the above approach. Having a diverse mix of energy sources tends to allow us to have some flexibility. And actually, there have been recent studies done that have shown that states that embrace that concept actually have the lower utility rates compared to states that are heavily renewable or heavily against renewable, for example. So it's a good place for us to be in, and I don't think you're going to see that change anytime soon.
Thank you for that. It was a really comprehensive overview and I love that we didn't just cover the typical, you know, what people are aware of, but some of the new innovations that are coming into energy. What we know, though, is with innovation, regulation is often coming up behind and isn't catching up at the rate of innovation. So what do you see the ACC's role in as part of these conversations? Where do you feel like the ACC might be a little bit behind, and you're kind of trying to play catch up to get in front of how we're going to regulate, how we're going to monitor, how we're going to permit these various different types of new energy sources that are coming out?
Well, thankfully, this commission has been somewhat forward thinking. And over the last couple of years, we've done a lot of things like changed up the way that we do our line siting committee, right? And make the line siting decisions and worked with legislators to make changes to that line siting process so that it makes it easier to get the permits. And in some cases, you don't even have to come to us anymore. The legislature has started to try to tackle some new technologies in this last session. Nothing went through. I totally understand why. It wasn't ready for prime time, but the fact that they're thinking about it is really where the benefit is starting to show, and you'll see that moving forward. And then a lot of those discussions were around planning and zoning type permits and land use rights, things of that nature. So I think that's one of them. The commission itself doesn't do a whole lot as far as permitting goes, besides the line siting. But we have kind of, and yes, we're getting sued on this, but I think we're going to win ultimately. But fundamentally, there were misinterpretations of the way the statute was written, as far as, well, if you have a 200 megawatt power plant, you would have to go through line siting. But if that's 450 megawatt power plants, then you wouldn't have to, because the nameplate rating on any individual one was 50 megawatts or less. So we've basically started changing that mindset and saying, hey, this is what the law says. We're going to enforce it strictly, but that allows a lot of this new development to come online faster. And we started having, we've had 2 of our 4 nuclear workshops. And the whole point of that was, we're already a nuclear friendly state. What are the bottlenecks? You know, is there anything we can do to move this process faster? So far, we've identified workforce development and supply chain are the 2 major hiccups. But, you know, we want to get from those utilities and from the developers, where can we be most effective in this process? Because, you know, we want to help. But I don't see us as being the bottleneck. I see more of a legislative thing, more of a federal permitting thing, those being the real bottlenecks. So I think that's the best we can do from a commission standpoint, is lead the discussions on a lot of this and steer the conversations. But I don't think we are the bottleneck at this point.
Mm-hmm. So speaking about bottlenecks, I'll give you a chance to defend the ACC against some of its most common misconceptions. What do you feel like is the most misunderstood thing about what the ACC can control, or what its work is, or, you know, how it inserts itself into these conversations?
Well, I guess that depends on the context, but the very easy answer is what everybody thinks, and that is, why are my rates going up all the time? Why can't you just say no to this rate case? And the fact of the matter is that we can't constitutionally just reject a rate case. You know, the utility came in, they asked for a rate, you know, they turned in their application to ask for a rate adjustment, and we have to go through this process to do that rate adjustment. And we can't just say, no, you've got enough money, unless they come in and they prove that they have enough money, obviously. But why would they have come in if that was the case? Utilities don't come in for rate decreases. It just doesn't happen. But I think beside that, people don't understand what it takes to set rates. And this is a 12 to 18 month process, depending on the size of the utility. And it's very much structured like a normal court case, where we have the defendants, which are the utilities. You have the plaintiffs, which are stakeholders. They are also the residential utility consumers office. They are the commission staff. They're any individuals, who kind of fall under stakeholders in a certain context, but individuals of that utility, customers of that utility, can intervene and actually be a part of it. And then there's the whole discovery phase and cross-examining of witnesses, and, you know, the whole works, all in front of an administrative law judge. And then that administrative law judge will take everything that's come out of that hearing process and put it together in what's called a recommended opinion and order. And then that RU, as we call it, comes to the commission, the 5 commissioners, and we get to then take either a hatchet or a scalpel or whatever. We kind of adjust it based on policy preferences, and you know, maybe we have a great example would be things like the board of directors fees for utilities. For years, those were allowed to be recovered by the customers of the utilities. But we didn't feel like that was appropriate, because board of directors work for the shareholders. They don't work for the customers. So we had this mindset shift when we came on board that said, hey, no more board of director fees do you get to recover. You pay for that out of your shareholder funds. Those are the types of things the commissioners get to deal with. But ultimately, it's our job to make sure that the utilities are not asking for too much, that it's a fair and balanced, just and reasonable type of rate. Usually it falls somewhere in the middle of what all the parties are saying is an appropriate rate, utilities being on the high end, of course, RUCO usually being the lowest, and everybody else somewhere in the middle. And that's, then we find it, and we find that happy middle, we fine tune it, and then we move on. But you know, we don't have the option of saying no, and it is a very complicated process, I think, would be the 2 biggest takeaways that people don't really understand.
And I think, you know, I appreciate that you mentioned kind of the rate changes, because economic developers are often found themselves to be in the middle of this conversation. They're bringing in businesses, so they're having the conversation with businesses about power needs, but they're also hearing from their communities that they want more businesses but don't want to have their rates impacted. So when working and talking with economic developers who are sort of in this, in the middle of a tight, rock hard place, how are you, what sort of things do you advise? What sort of things do you, mention and talk about that is important for economic developers to be aware of when they're having these conversations with both businesses and communities?
Well, I think one of the big things that, at least the impressions that I've gotten over the years of doing this, is economic development people in general and businesses that want to relocate to Arizona or build in Arizona, really what they're looking for is, obviously everybody wants the lowest rates they can get, but they really want stability. They don't want people changing rules in the middle of the game. They don't, the fact that the commission is elected, by and large, creates an instability, because every 2 years you could have a flip-flop of policies and things of that nature. So really what our goal is, and this is not just, me and Kevin, but the other three commissioners, Renee, Rachel, and Leah. We've all kind of got the same mindset of we need to have some stability in our regulatory environment. How do we do that, right? And the best way to do that is to get involved, right? Have your economic development team get involved in the rate case process. Figure out, is it fair, reasonable, just, and then at that point you can have that discussion about, well, why do things need to be done this way? Can they be done a different way? And you hash that out in front of the judge, but that's the place to do it. And so my advice really is just get involved. And because what you said in that rate case is likely to be there for a little while, and it may actually be viewed by the commissioners as a sort of precedent going forward. So it's best, especially in this time of huge economic growth, and we're talking about extra high load tariffs and things like that. Now is the time to get involved and make sure that those processes are developed in an appropriate way, because it may be stuck for a while.
Mm-hmm. And I love, that's a great way to ask if we have time for maybe one or two questions from the audience. So the challenges, ways to get involved and make sure that economic developers are participating in a part of the conversation. Do any of our attendees have a question? Feel free to put it at the very bottom of your screen, you should see a Q&A icon. You can put your questions in there and we will do our best to answer one or two before Nick has to head off. But I did want to just thank you, Nick, for taking the time today to speak to us a little bit about what the Arizona Corporation Commission does. If people wanted to get involved, what is the best way for them to do so?
Depending on how you want to get involved, probably the best way is just reach out to one of the offices. You can reach out to my office, bring up your questions, concerns, or how do you want to get involved, and we'll help you through the process. There's different ways, but our office doors are always open. I don't think there's any commissioner on the commission right now that is of the mindset that they can't talk to the public or anything like that. So just reach out and have the conversations.
All right. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Jack, who's going to introduce our next speaker.
Awesome. Thank you, Katie. And thank you again, Chairman. Please pass along our thanks to Doug and Ryan. They were both great to help facilitate this conversation today. And thank you for the information. That was very helpful, I'm sure, for many of us on the call. With that being said, and without further ado, I would like to introduce Ty Rodney with Kinder Morgan. And he'll start us off with some of the various forms of energy that are being utilized today in Arizona. So welcome, Ty, and please take it away.
Starting out, I'll start high level, kind of work more into a narrow focus throughout the presentation. And so Kinder Morgan, it really is, it's an energy infrastructure company based in Houston, Texas. As the map shows, we have a footprint in most of the continental United States. We own an interest in or operate roughly 80,000 miles of pipelines, 139 terminals, handle all sorts of forms of energy, such as natural gas, CO2, crude oil. Our terminals handle products from renewable fuels, petroleum products, to vegetable oils. And so one thing too, a statistic I find pretty interesting here and on the slide is that 40% roughly of the natural gas consumed in the United States is transported through Kinder Morgan pipelines. And so looking a little more focused now in Arizona, what is Kinder Morgan's footprint? So we operate approximately 5,800 miles of pipelines, 2 terminals and 2 corporate offices in the state. Comes out to about 15 counties that we have some sort of footprint in. Our EP&G system, which I'll go into more on the next slide, that's our El Paso natural gas system. It's, as the name suggests, natural gas, but serves various utilities in the state, such as APS, Southwest Gas, SRP. Our SFPP system, that's our Santa Fe Petroleum Products system, and that throughout the state fuels, really all the airports, whether it's Sky Harbor, Tucson International, as well as military bases. And so overall, we employ about 280 people, and you can see the numbers there on payroll and roughly $20 million annually to state and local taxing bodies. So as I mentioned just before, the El Paso natural gas system, I want to focus on this given just our topic today being natural gas. So this system you can see it really sprawls the Southwest from California, Arizona, New Mexico, goes serves Nevada, is into Colorado, all the way over into Texas and Oklahoma. Roughly just over a 10,000-mile pipeline system that is one of our key natural gas assets in the country, let alone Southwest. And so I think this slide might have made more sense for me to present in Snowflake, but all the same, wanted to certainly focus in a little on our assets on Navajo County and northern Arizona. And so you can see here, and this kind of will help build as well some of the points I'd like to make later in the presentation, where we have our main lines in the county, which really is the northernmost line going east to west. We have 4 lines there that are part of this mainline network, 24 to 34 inches in diameter. You can see that, been there for decades, back to the 50s for some of them. And then we also have what are called laterals, which, the name kind of suggests, but what it really means is we're coming off of a main line, at least in this sense, to serve markets that would otherwise not be traversed or served by the main line itself. And so here these are smaller lines, 2 to 8 inches. This is Winslow, Joseph City. I know that font's not the best. And Holbrook down there, and those lines as well have been there for decades, 50s and 60s. And so that's kind of the background on Kinder Morgan and Arizona. And so want to kind of look more now towards the future and what's in store there. And so, first off, challenges for energy infrastructure. I think these 4 challenges that are listed here are in many ways intertwined. Project opposition can certainly have an influence on regulatory uncertainty. State and local factors might bear on eminent domain, vice versa. And so I think this is something that when it comes to any form of development, energy infrastructure in particular, these are constants. And so they're constants, and yet each situation, I would say, is a little bit different. And so, it's important to keep in mind that you can have certain principles that you are using as your kind of your point of departure in energy infrastructure development, but there always needs to be a more nuanced approach, given the specifics and the environment, so on and so forth. And I think we've found that a lot as a company at the challenge to state and local. And it's one thing to keep state agencies and state elected officials informed on the project and have your outreach with them, and very, very important. But I think also too, what maybe it was missed. I think it's industry standards. It is getting better, but it's the local outreach, whether that's municipalities, county commissioners, and so oftentimes, that is where constituents vet their concerns first, and so it is at that local level where I think it is essential to get ahead of what could potentially be a challenge, and I think oftentimes too is we'll hear concerns about for example, eminent domain. Oftentimes people don't have familiarity with certain concepts involved in energy development, or energy infrastructure development. One of them being eminent domain, which can be a significant challenge to overcome once that takes the minds of a local constituency. And so, I think challenge 3 here, eminent domain, really to me means the challenge is how to avoid eminent domain, and oftentimes that means those in-person meetings with stakeholders early on in the project at the local level who are immediately affected by what's being proposed, so that we can have our positioning where the source of any potential need for recognition from the company would be. And so, no, I'm kind of running a little on time, but so why Arizona? What I think makes Arizona unique about, as a state relative to other states is that it has, really a history with energy infrastructure. As you saw some of our lines there in Navajo County alone are back in the 50s. And so um, there's just this legacy proficiency that I think the state has that many other states might not. And there's also active projects that are going on in the state. There's opportunity to refine those skills. And so there is a very qualified workforce. Clear regulatory processes. I think that is true. I think, last slide said regulatory uncertainty is one of the challenges. And so I think what makes Arizona, gives it really the competitive edge compared to other states is that, all things considered, its processes are quite clear, in terms of regulation. And then, I think the rest, again, kind of go together. Economic development, touched on that. Energy smart population just kind of follows. Such projects have been in the state and are currently underway. So my last slide here, wanted to talk kind of, what has our model been and what might we expect looking forward. I think the bottom line is incremental growth. So for Kinder Morgan and the state of Arizona, what that really means for us is utilizing our existing assets to expand and serve developing needs. In Navajo County, there were, I touched on the mainland, the laterals, how that worked out, but other parts of the state too. So more in southern Arizona by Tucson, we had our Sierrita pipeline, which was in service back in 2014, into the Sierrita compressor expansion project, which is 2020. And so the Sierrita pipeline was built off of our EP&G system, and then compressor expansion was built off of that. And so just and similar here with Maricopa lateral expansion. So we have our Maricopa lateral expansion project underway currently today. And looking into the future, I think one of the things that positions Kinder Morgan in the state so well is our existing assets. Going back to that, just the EP&G system that was 10,000 or so miles, in the sense that a lot of the agencies, elected officials, local stakeholders, we are already there in most places. And so when we begin those conversations moving forward, we oftentimes already have some sort of connection or relationship with the area that is potentially impacted by this proposed project. And so, I just want to emphasize again, having the system in place is conducive and helps facilitate that incremental growth and later expansion.
All right, fantastic. So we will move on to what the chairman of the ACC had mentioned a bit earlier on some of the newer forms of energy. And so with that, I'd like to welcome Ben Snyder with Visionaire. Ben, whenever you're ready, you can share your screen and we'll get started.
Okay, can everybody see me at the moment and hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I have with me Scott Ferrara, our Chief Regulatory Officer, as well as our acting COO, and then Claire Casada is on with me as well. Our Chairman, Nick Myers, what a great intro. And he touched on quite nicely the exciting time that we're in. And I'll just start by saying, when there's possibilities and problems, I get really excited and attracted. And the bigger the problems and the bigger the possibilities, I just seem to be extremely attracted to those. And I'll give you just a brief introduction. Again, my name is Ben Snyder. I am the chairman of the board and CEO of Fission Air Corporation. And we are an early stage nuclear startup company specializing in a particular alternative fuel source for nuclear, which I can get into a little bit, but I'll probably leave some of that for Scott, who's going to join and help present this. The thing I wanted to say, though, is AI has changed all of our lives. It's driving us as one of, if not the latest, greatest discoveries in humankind, has really changed. Obviously, we're all on this call largely as a result of what's happening in our economies, what's happening in our world and our country. So energy security has become the number one issue. And so I will give you just a brief background how I landed in nuclear, because I'm not, as many of the people on our team are nuclear chemists and engineers and PhDs and multiple PhDs, because you need a lot of really smart people to develop a nuclear company. And we are blessed to have an amazing team with an amazing technology at an amazing time. I don't believe we could have launched Fission Air 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Frankly, for the last 50 years, nuclear as a solution has been largely unfunded because the demand wasn't there. And I'll just give you another little brief history. Admiral Rickover beautifully took us into the Navy and developed nuclear subs and carriers and ships. And largely we were supplying our nuclear solutions, which I think everybody knows that about 20% of the United States energy supply today, it's 19.2%, is supplied by our 94 existing fleet of light water reactors, of which we have 3 operational there at Palo Verde. I could talk all day about this, but I'm going to try and keep my comments brief. So at Palo Verde, one of our engineers who brought this to me 3 years ago held the license at Palo Verde. And he came to me and he started talking about the anticipated coming energy demand. And so, knowing I was a serial entrepreneur who's been across a number of industries, he came and presented this coming opportunity, which I had no idea 3 years ago how big this was going to be and how the timing would be so great to bring forward and be a part of a team of people like yourselves to bring forward solutions. But I was tremendously excited, and I cannot help but tell you, 20 years ago, I got interested in thorium. And as I mentioned, we're an alternative. Fission Air uses an alternative fuel. And my son, who's today's 36 years old, he's a COO of our real estate office. But when he was 16 years old, 20 years ago, he came home and he goes, Dad, I got it. The biggest thing ever. We used to play a game. What's the biggest thing you can think of? Thorium will one day fuel the planet with energy too cheap to meter. That's what he said to me 20 years ago. And it kind of stuck. So when this problem, and I love solving problems, is to look for opportunities to solve that, came up, I remembered that conversation. And I went around. The nuclear community is quite small. And I just went to the university's labs and started asking to learn about nuclear. And I said, well, if you had unlimited resources, because right now the problem is so great, we do in the private industry have essentially unlimited resources to solve this problem because the demand is so great, which is great news because the government doesn't have to come up with the money, and it's difficult for them to do that, but the private sector can. So we can bring forward the capital to do this as part of the problem solving team that we all are together. But I am honored to be here and speaking with you. I want to give Scott a chance to give you a more specific description of Fissionaire, but I just generally want to say that we see ourselves as part of the solution. If everybody working on energy solutions succeeded, starting with the obviously urgently needed current forms of energy and gas being a main solution, our previous speaker talking about supplying the solution right now, the immediate solution. We see Fissionaire as a long-term solution. And I'll let Scott kind of go into that a little bit more. But thank you for having us. And I'd love to field some questions at the end. If we could turn it over to Scott for a moment.
Yeah. So thanks, Ben. I appreciate that. And happy to be here. I'm going to share my screen a little bit, but before I get too quick and deep into this, I just want to let you know my background. I was 36 years in this business, never been more excited about nuclear safety, nuclear development, deployment, and regulatory. Before I came to work for Fissionaire and Ben, I was the National Technical Director for DOE's Regulatory Development Program. I've operated 6 different reactors in my lifetime and built space batteries for nuclear in space, Mars Science Lab, and others. So a breadth of experience in the nuclear world, but never been so excited about a technology as I have for our technology with Fissionaire. So, Ben, myself, really appreciate you having us here. I wanted to build on your pillars here from this morning. I was looking at your pillars. Education is one of the pillars that you guys have. So I wanted to talk about small modular reactors in general initially, and then we'll go into a little more detail on our specific technology. So what are small modular reactors? They're exactly what they say. They're small, they're modular. They're normally between 50 and 300 megawatts. They're built at component scale in mass production in factories. And so I just want to make sure everybody, I heard it earlier in the presentation, about a data center opening up that's 300 megawatts right off the bat. And I think it was Commissioner Nick from the Arizona Corporation Commission saying the grid isn't ready for that, hasn't been built for that. And that's true. So these small modular reactors, instead of putting diesels in place, you can be up to 300 megawatts with these. They can be modular, and that's up to 300 homes or maybe a large data center. What types of small modular reactors are there? So most people on this call are probably very familiar with pressurized water reactors like Palo Verde. I've operated 6 different pressurized water reactors, but reactors can come in all different shapes and sizes. The new advanced pressurized water reactors you've heard of, like BWRX 300, that's going to be deployed up in Canada. That is a advanced pressurized water reactor, and those reactors are pretty much self-contained. They have, advanced safety features, passive cooling, and enhanced safety over current designs, but still normally do use the same types of fuel that were used previously. When we talk about advanced non-light water reactors, there's high temperature gas reactors, there's liquid metal fast reactors, and there's molten salt reactors, as Ben just spoke about our amazing technology. And I'll go into that a little bit more. Down here in the corner is our challenge point for Fissionaire. Alvin Weinberg was one of the pioneers of advanced reactor technologies and actually did develop the molten salt reactor experiment at Oak Ridge, which operated for 1,300 hours, or 13,000 hours, successfully. And he was a pioneer, not just in molten salt reactors, but in all reactors. He was actually right there with Admiral Rickover in helping our country move forward with different reactor types. So some of the advantages of small modular reactors, I talked a little bit about this, passive safety. Most of them are walk away safe, don't require operator actions for a period of time. Their decay heat is naturally dissipated, and you don't have the traditional problems of having to have emergency core cooling systems and external systems that have to activate and take an action when there's a natural phenomenon or a loss of power. They don't have to take an action and actually perform. They're passively cooled and passively safe. So there's also high temperature heat for industrial applications. Some reactors like ours can operate up between 650 and 750 degrees C. This is huge for industrial purposes and industrial applications, not just energy production. They can use advanced fuels, potentially reducing waste that we already have. Some of them can actually burn spent fuel. There are companies that are looking at taking spent nuclear fuel and using that as their fuel source and reprocessing that material, therefore reducing the existing burden of spent nuclear fuel. And the low power operating pressure is one of our trademarks as well with our technology. Most reactors operate at a very high pressure, so you have to maintain that pressure so it doesn't boil off, similar to your radiator in a car. So the newer technologies, most of them are operating at or near atmospheric pressure. Ours is right at atmospheric pressure. So there's no motive force for movement of material if there is a problem or there is a leak. There's nothing to actually move that material. And I think I talked a little bit about the advanced modular design portion. So Fissionaire, our vision is to enhance human life through safe, affordable, clean nuclear energy scaled globally at the lowest possible cost forever. Our mission is to develop and commercialize this cost-effective, proliferation-resistant thermal spectrum molten salt breeder reactor. And why I want to specifically talk about proliferation resistance is when we talk about nuclear fuels and small modular reactors, large reactors, micro reactors, all of them have to abide by guidelines to make sure that we don't have an issue with material at risk, material being diverted for non-peaceful purposes. So our specific technology, we don't use uranium other than as a starter fuel, and uranium-235 is what's used by most of the fleet. Advanced fuels like HALEU, which is made of triisotopic fuel particles, very robust, very safe. But our fuel is from thorium, which comes from mining tails. Those mining tails are sitting at rare earth metal mines, waiting for a disposition path. So by using that thorium fuel cycle, the thorium naturally goes into our reactor. The reactor naturally converts that thorium to uranium-233, thereby creating our own fuel. And so it alleviates three things. It gets rid of a mining waste product that is currently hampering our rare earth metal mining and rare earth campaign that is near and dear to our government. Our administration is very interested in becoming independent of China on rare earth. So it helps alleviate that waste burden there, thereby opening that mine back up and allowing it to pull monzonite and other rare earths out of the ground, gets rid of the waste. And then for us, with our fuel, we don't have fuel rods on the front end or the back end. The fuel is mixed into the salt. So therefore, we don't have significant quantities of waste on the backside of our fuel cycle. So we don't have to fabricate the fuel. We don't have to deal with spent fuel waste on the back end. We keep recycling our salt, reloading our salt with thorium. And once we've burned out our first load of uranium-235, we no longer need that. So this is key to Arizona, and Ben might want to talk a little bit more about this because he's been such an advocate with water conservation in Arizona with his companies. So we don't use any water for our cooling. We need very little water internal to the plant. And as we all know, with siting of these data centers, water is an absolute huge issue. So our system doesn't add to that burden, doesn't need any water cooling. We're proliferation resistant, and then we're fully passively safe. Ben, did you want to say any more about water conservation and some of the projects you've worked on for Arizona?
Yeah, long history of developing water solutions. 34 years ago, I developed point of use equipment. We were deploying that throughout the world where it's needed most, where 20% of the planet wakes up and they don't necessarily have a guaranteed safe drink of water. So that's a business that is very passionate to my wife and myself and our family and my partners. I also started a company called Hydromerge Corporation to take rainwater and recharge it into the groundwater and recharge our aquifers. And I was on another call this morning. We're collaborating with some of you that are actually on the call, as well as the state and Prescott Valley, as well as the universities to bring forward the data that shows that we are actually able to take a small percentage of the rain, that 90% of it evaporates, and encouraging it down into the groundwater table, and a very small percent of that rainwater going into our aquifers is a game changer. So I'm working on that. Very excited. But what I really love about Visionaire is we are able to air cool. So those two 96-inch pipes that come from Phoenix and take all the effluent out to Palo Verde, one day we won't need to do that when we can use Visionaire technology, thermal spectrum molten salt breeders that just are air cooled, so we don't need to cool with water, which is fantastic, right, for the Southwest.
Yeah, and Ben, if I can jump in as well with with regard to our tech and no water usage, just right now, one of our director for quality assurance, who just came on board and lives in Phoenix, she's talking about data centers coming up and all the demand for data centers and the diesel power that's being used sometimes behind the meter. These small modular reactors can be used either by like APS operating them for a utility or for a developer, chip manufacturer, or a data center. And they can also be operated as part of the infrastructure currently existing for a large-scale utility like APS. And I believe APS is actually doing a study on this right now, if I remember correctly, from the Arizona Corporation Commission meeting. So these small modular reactors can also be stacked. So our system, we're designing it so that it has a thermal energy storage system so that it can grow in size as these data centers get thirstier and thirstier for more energy. But I guess we're getting pretty close to the end of our time. I wanted to make sure if anybody had questions for Ben or myself, whether it's on our tech or on small modular reactors or even regulatory, as I'm very intimate with both the NRC's processes and the DOE processes.
Awesome. All right. Well, we'll just keep going right into it. And so, speaking more on energy and what is available today to help address some of Arizona's demand is behind the meter solutions. And here with us from NRTD is Aaron Burkhart. Aaron, I think I saw you on, and I believe you have a presentation. So if you want to go ahead and start sharing your screen, and I'll turn it over to you, my friend.
Sure. Thanks, Jack. How are you today? Thanks, everyone, for inviting me here today. My name's Aaron Burkhart. I'm calling in from the ACP conference down here in Houston, Texas. That's the American Clean Power Conference. A little bit about myself. I am a partner of NRTD, that's Native Resilience and Technology Development. We are a group of subject matter experts in the energy space and technology space, really working to facilitate more energy opportunities and getting more Native communities involved in larger economic development, both within the communities, but also as they reach outwardly to the larger states, larger communities. So that's a bit about what we do. A little bit about myself. I also am co-owner of one of the country's longest running renewable specific engineering firms and a former climate scientist with ERM. So yeah, I'm going to just talk a little bit about behind the meter. Sounds simple, you're kind of curious, but it's becoming more and more complex as time goes on. So let me bring up I just have a single slide to kind of give you a good visualization of what that looks like. All right, so let's simplify what behind the meter means, right? Typically, behind the meter really just means that we're discussing everything that's on your side or the customer side of the billing meter from the larger utility, right? So when I say behind the meter, that's everything that doesn't go into the wider grid. I know in more very simplified traditional routes, your house was just a load center for the grid. Your business, your company, they're just pulling power from the grid. You run the meter and you get a bill. So now what we're seeing more and more often is the development of behind the meter energy systems and infrastructure which basically is that these are designed and installed before it goes past the utilities meter. Particularly when we're looking at data centers, hospitals, industrial facilities, even business campuses, they have a lot of power. They need a lot of power, right? They also have further and further complexities. So what we're seeing now is people installing, energy generation. That's everything from solar. It can include thermal, gas, you name it, type of power generation on their side. That's then also being pulled from the data center, the industrial facility. So they're basically using their own power on site, right? So that's considered a behind the meter project. Now, as battery storage is kind of coming in, that has been such a big game changer in energy infrastructure. And that really with the advent of that battery storage, we're kind of have better control of energy, both as it goes to the grid, comes off the grid, and really, things like traditionally people feel like renewable wasn't much of a baseload power. Now with energy storage, I certainly can run a renewable project 24 hours a day. Just a matter about how I design that project and the power consumed and the power generated. Go a little bit further. What's most important about the behind the meter here is going to be your EMS system. So this kind of gives you that larger control. What this is that is a control center that now is managing the power generated, then also managing how much load is being pulled off that. That's everything from HVAC, lighting, industrial processes, the data center itself. And that would really be what we would call behind the meter. It's becoming more and more complex. Post IRA, this is really, there's a lot more flexibility in allowing people, industries, other folks to develop these sort of energy hub, I like to call it sometimes. That's before the meter. Now, of course, we a lot of times also want to have connection to the grid, right? We just have better redundancy. So it's really a matter about working together to provide better resilience and better management for some of our largest load consumers. I mean, as I said, bringing on a 300 megawatt data center to the grid, it's very taxing. It's very expensive, right? So then we want to talk about the value add, and the value add to thinking about your behind the meter solutions is, okay, great. We're going to add some solar. We're going to we're going to add some energy storage. We also need to have some backup generators on site because of our particular facility, the way that it operates. Now with more EV, we want to have some EV charging on site. So you can kind of see how there's becoming more and more of these complexities for large facilities on their side of the metering bill grid, right, from the utility. So yeah, behind the meters is becoming more and more complex. So really taking that a step further from there, we want to talk about, where the further returns come from in this, which is really going to be value stacking. That's any sort of project that really shines, is that they are combining every type of different system that can be considered as behind the meter into their project. They're not just thinking solar on my manufacturing facility and we got the grid connected, right? That's only a couple items, but they can add, as you see on this chart here, you can add all kinds of other elements, a really good battery storage, other generating facility that is backup or cogen, more energy management controls. And that the more you can kind of value stack, the more you have flexibility to determine kind of like your economic incentives and which that you can deal with that. A lot of things in those sorts of economic benefits, we're looking at energy bill savings, offsetting utility consumptions, demand charge reductions, that really cutting peak energy demands from the grid when you have these spikes of power, right? If you have a good energy storage system, a good management system, you have your own generating on site, you're not going to worry about grid fluctuations. You're not going to worry about grid outages. And that's becoming more and more incredibly important for a hospital, data centers, military use cases, you name it, right? Then kind of other bits of that added value stacking is really your other grid services, revenue, demand responses, curtailing those sorts of cost and energy bits. Fast battery response. So if the grid then needs power from you, you're an energy hub. They know that you're there. You're grid connected to them. They can pull power off. That's supporting the grid. Then you can also maintain your offsite energy storage and your behind the meter mechanisms. Really, and then I think like the other really, really important thing to talk within that resilience and that strategic value bit is that you're talking about your resilience. You can also provide carbon credits, you have renewable energy credits, outage continuity for the backup power. So really it's becoming a very, very exciting part to the larger energy infrastructure conversations, right? We're not just talking about a singular load going onto the grid or back and forth, but really these large locations, you really want to think about what you can do to manage your energy as energy becomes such a valuable resource. How can we manage that? And our team is going to be working with industry folks, leaders, different tribal nations, you name it, to think about how energy hubs, how you can provide that management system, those energies for customers across Arizona and across the United States, for that matter, really. I know I'm kind of going rather fast because I would love to be able to answer some questions about that. But, really from a high level into a low level, that's really what we think about when we think about what behind the meter is. It is that on-site distribution and management, both power generation and load units, and it's everything that's behind the billing meter from the utility.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I did see my friend Kelly jump onto the screen. So talking about one of the largest players in the energy, certainly the largest player for Northern Arizona. I'll welcome Kelly Patton with APS.
Perfect. Jack, thank you for the opportunity. Katie, thank you for hosting us. APS, obviously a longtime supporter of AAED, and appreciate the chance to talk with everybody today and share a little bit about the state of the state. So APS, just a little bit about us. I know many of you are familiar. I know a lot of you personally, as well as the rest of my team on the ground in Northern Arizona, but just a little bit of a recap, and some of this information will be fairly relevant, even more relevant in a minute. But APS, we are the state's largest power company, largest and longest serving. We just celebrated our 140th birthday 2 months ago now. We are investor owned, so we are publicly traded on the stock market under Pinnacle West. And as you are aware by Chairman Meyer's conversation earlier, that we are governed by the Arizona Corporation Commission. About 34,000 square miles. You can see the blue is our service territory, 11 out of 15 counties, 1.4 million customer accounts, consistently rank at the top 10 of 12 years for reliability. So extremely important to all of our customers plugging into the grid. We spent about $2.4 billion in grid operations and updates in 2025 alone. We don't see that number decreasing as we continue to keep up with the power requests and increasing our infrastructure to serve all these customers. We have about a 15% reserve margin, diversity of resources, which helps play into those reliability numbers. 100% carbon neutral by 2050. We are currently about 59% carbon free today. And we are operator and part owner of Palo Verde, which is currently the largest nuclear power plant in the country, soon to be number 2 per Chairman Meyer's conversation earlier, with Georgia beating us by about 800 megawatts. So, and I want to make a quick note here. So Palo Verde, the largest power plant in the United States of America, currently produces just about 4,000 megawatts of power. And that number is going to be very relevant here in a minute. The grid, you may be aware, divided into 3 sections. So we are obviously part of the Western Interconnect. You have the Eastern, and then you have Texas, which sits solo. As a regulated utility or regulated state, which Arizona is, we generate, transport, and distribute our power. So I always like to say you have one neck to choke or one back to pat when the power works. Unfortunately, Texas is a deregulated state. That's where they kind of ran into some problems in 2021 when they had a very deep freeze and different entities supporting different parts of the grid. So you have one group supporting transmission, one group supporting distribution, and then one group supporting generation. So there were 3 different groups to kind of point fingers at. In Arizona, you have one provider, and we are responsible for all of it. So the fact that we are also interconnected to the western half of the United States also brings into account some of our reliability as well as our affordability. So 3 top things, and if you all know likely Ted Geisler, our president and CEO, if you have heard him speak, he will say from the mountaintop, we are not risking reliability. We are not risking affordability. we're also not going to shut down economic development in the state of Arizona. So we are here to support all of the entities that need to be served. But again, we're going to do it reliably and affordably. Those are our two top mantras in addition to safety. So again, reliability and resiliency, extremely important for all of us, especially in economic development as we work to attract new companies to the state. They want to know that their lights are going to stay on. Two measures of that are typical across the country are SAIDI and SAFI scores. So a SAFI score is the frequency of an outage. So the number of time in a 12-month period that you will experience an outage, and then SAIDI is a duration. So is it 30 seconds, 30 minutes, or 3 hours? Affordability, again, top priority for us. We have consistently raised rates under the rate of inflation. So we are very proud of that. We continue to look to make sure that our bills are fair and equitable across all of our customer classes. Power trends. So as you can see, and again, many of you have seen this presentation before, but you can see in 1990 to 2010, United States is that gray line, APS is the blue line. So, as the state continued to grow and evolve between 1990 and 2010, APS saw about 3.3% year-over-year growth. Between 2010 and 2023, because of offshoring, because of energy efficiency, we are only experiencing about a 1% growth. But in 2023, you can see that trajectory extremely take off. And APS, that 4.3% has actually, I've seen a new graph that suggests more like 5.3 to 7% year over year growth in terms of our power requests. Again, not a big secret. If all of us that live here in Arizona, severe climate impact, right? The state's getting a little hotter, the world's getting a little hotter. So we need to make sure those air conditionings are continuing to run. Maricopa County, as well as the rest of Arizona, has continued to be the recipient of high population growth. So we've just got a lot more people moving here that we need to support. Emerging data center hub, again, big conversation of the day is all those data centers that are looking at the state and how we're going to serve those, and then manufacturing growth, right? So all that offshoring that took place in 2010 to 2023 is now reshoring. And we've got electric vehicles. We've got potential hydrogen production. We also have a lot more automation in the manufacturing process. So all of that equals a higher need for power. Kind of the money slide, I think, for those that aren't uber familiar with the amount of power that we're talking about in terms of the requests that Arizona is seeing. So to give you perspective, a large grocery store, think of it a Costco or Super Walmart, about 1 megawatt of power. Data center, our average ask is about 400 megawatts. I would suggest that number might even be a little higher now. To give some perspective of what 400 megawatts is, that produces power for 64,000 homes. So I think what happens is a lot of times people hear the number 400 and they're like, that's not that big of a number. In the power world, it is a massive, massive number. Again, think of Palo Verde, the largest power producer generator in the country currently produces 4,000 megawatts of power. We have some data centers asking as high as 2,000 megawatts per site. So if you start thinking about that, that is half of the largest nuclear power plant in the country is what some of these are asking for. So you can see on the bottom, sorry, it's a little cut off. I can hide that. We have over 29,000 megawatts and growing. So APS last year hit our new peak load of 8,600 megawatts. We expect that peak to continue to increase. So to give you, we have perspective, again, 29,000 megawatts of requests. So just over 3 times the existing generation capacity of our system. Again, top market for data centers. Phoenix is ranked number 2. Arizona is ranked number 3 overall. So absolutely northern Arizona, this conversation is taking place. And I like this slide because it shows this is not just an Arizona conversation. This is a national conversation taking place, as well as a global conversation taking place. So not just an Arizona specific opportunity to be able to work with all of our data center partners and all of our communities to stand up some of these facilities as they are needed. To give perspective to why the extra power increase, if you start talking about how much ChatGPT and how much power it actually consumes, it's fairly significant. So when you're, laying in bed at night and you're sending cat videos to your mom, or creating cat videos for your mom, you can understand the types of power requests that were being asked for, and that's asking from the grid. So again, 8,600 megawatts. We've been in business 140 years. We expect that peak to increase at least 32% in the next 5 years alone. So how are we going to do that, right? Commissioner Myers, or Chairman Myers, did a great job outlining earlier some of that diversification in terms of APS resources, right? Just like your stock portfolio, you don't put all your 401k portfolio, you don't put all your eggs in one stock. You diversify to hedge risk. So we are absolutely bringing on more renewables, but we really need to focus on that nuclear and natural gas opportunity. Again, all of the above approach, right? There is a need for all of these types of generation to service the grid and to service our customers. But we do need to identify more 24/7 generation in order to serve this 24/7 need that a data center requests. And that's going to be natural gas and nuclear. We did have an original goal to exit coal by 2031. We are now extending that to ensure that we can keep our reliability where it needs to be and make sure that all those air conditioners and those heaters keep running, and that we're continuing to attract new opportunity and new investment to Arizona. So there was an announcement last fall of a natural gas pipeline. So APS, SRP, Southwest Gas are major off-takers of this pipeline. We expect it to be in service of 2029. APS's portion of this is going to be about 2,000 megawatts. So definitely assisting with the requests that we have in our queue, but obviously just starts to scratch the surface. So you're going to see some more announcements related to that. Nuclear is also an opportunity that we are heavily invested in. APS, SRP, TEP are all together in terms of exploring new nuclear options. But just as we've already talked about, we do anticipate that being roughly a decade away. We need to, again, prove the reliability, the affordability, and the safety of those entities to be able to bring onto our grid. APS, we are not going to be serial adopter number 1, but we might be serial adopter number 7 or 8. Obviously, we are huge supporters of nuclear and see it as the future and, quite frankly, our carbon-free future. Investment, you can see the amount of investment that we anticipate in 2025. We should have those estimates actually verified, which we can update, and then in 2027. So you can see where we're spending dollars and putting our balance sheet to work for our customers to make sure that we are keeping those lights on and we're doing it reliably and affordably. Every 3 years, we file what's noted as an IRP, or an integrated resource plan. This is an example from 3 years ago. We're getting ready to file a new one at this fall, at the end of 2026. But essentially, it signals to the commission, hey, this is where we see our need and our growth going. And this is where our stack, right? This is our proposed generation stack that we're going to build and construct in order to help serve that need. Again, a little bit outdated. 3-year timeline is a fairly safe bet. A 5-year timeline. Once you start getting into 10 or 15, obviously, we'll see what the future holds in terms of new opportunities for generation to add to this stack. Along with that IRP, we also file a 10-year transmission plan. So how are we getting the power from point A to point B? We do update this every year. So we do have this as a public-facing document. Happy to send if you don't have it already. And it just shows where we are planning to build transmission, again, to help serve. Commissioner Myers also brought up the rate case earlier in his comments. So just like any other component of your daily life, inflation is real. And just because we are a power company does not mean we are immune to it. So we are in the process of a rate case with the Corporation Commission and talking through why some of that is needed. Obviously, customer impacts, bringing rates closer to the cost of service. Data center recovery, again, talking about making sure that growth is paying for growth, and then adjusting formula-based rates. And that's just a mechanism that allows us to be able to adjust rates up or down based on certain factors that we experience. So if we do go in for a rate case, it's not a one-time impact. That up or down fluctuation is a little softer versus maybe some big rate hike that you might all of a sudden see in your bill. But it does give us that opportunity to adjust as needed to a certain degree. And again, it's a helps us to keep those costs consistent. But then if there is an opportunity to save customers money, we certainly want to do that. Again, cost of inflation, supply chain is real. I think we've talked a little bit about that already. So again, it's not just APS, it's all of my fellow economic development, investor-owned and municipal employees across the country are experiencing the same thing. So manufacturers are able to, raise their prices a little bit. It's economics 101. So all of these things just cost a little bit more than they used to in order to serve and to keep that reliability and affordability. Power and partnerships. I think this webinar proves, this Northern Summit, that we're all in this together. We all have a goal of continuing, promoting economic development in Arizona and job investment, capital investment. We're here for it. We just want to make sure that we're keeping the lights on and keeping all of those rates affordable. So I tell people we'll get there. It's just going to take some time. This is a new era. And for all of us, this challenge or opportunity didn't exist 4 or 5 years ago. So we're here for it, and we're happy to partner with all of you to make sure it happens.
All right. Well, we'll keep rolling, everyone. And I'd like to introduce and welcome Representative James Taylor. I know you were probably just getting out of budget meetings, sir. I was getting emails last night at 2 a.m., so I can only imagine what you've been dealing with, but really appreciate you joining us today.
Absolutely my pleasure. And thank you to Kelly for being flexible in her schedule to speak on this event. I really appreciate that. Like you said, there's quite a bit of opportunity to change when you think you're going to be doing something these days. Generally surrounding the budget. So that's correct. One thing, just as an aside, not really the point of my whole discussion, but data centers. That's one of the sticking points, or one of the suggestions to negotiate out are sales tax exemptions for data centers. And so that's something that's a current event and is continuing to be discussed and could have an impact as far as future data centers being built in Arizona go, because if they don't have as an attractive financial situation, they may find another state to build their data center. All they need is power and a connection to the internet. So anyway, that's an interesting topic that kind of goes along with this. But really, from my perspective, the temperature here at the Capitol, as far as power goes, I would say it's generally very positive. There's a push here in the legislature to try to clear the path for any subsequent replacement power and new power that we want to build. The concept is 3 decades ago, we had a certain mix of fuels. It had some hydro in it, and it had some nuclear in it, and natural gas and coal. Right now, we have a different mix of all of our power generation. And in 2 decades, it'll be another different mix entirely. We already know that. The utilities are used to dealing with that. That's something they've been dealing with for decades and decades and decades, and they know how to do their business. So they don't need any help from the state to do that. They do need some cooperation so that they can go hand in hand with the Corporation Commission as they step into the future. But as far as the legislature goes, there's not too much opportunity or too much requirement for us. So generally speaking, I would say where we're at the legislature, at the Capitol, is trying to clear a path for whatever new or replacement generation that we have that's coming up. We also address and recognize that there will be co-located generation, and we try to do what we can to try to clear a path for that, to not make the utilities or the people that build, say, a data center jump through hoops unnecessarily, or cause unnecessary delays, because all of that has a habit of being causing risk to their capital, and they would prefer to avoid that. So that's generally what the state is. Some examples of that. I personally had a bill that I ran that said as long as you had an existing plant, if you shut it down, like say in Joseph City, and you wanted to replace the coal plant with a new gas plant, that all you would need to do is have one county hearing, and you could use the existing environmental compatibility permit there. So that seems like a reasonable thing to do. The point of it is where else would you build replacement generation other than where you already had the transmission lines, the equipment's already been purchased, you already have the switchyard, you already have all of the studies to make it okay to have a power plant there, and you're just changing this fuel source. It seems logical not to drag the ratepayers through unnecessary expense on the part of the utilities to get permission and approval to build the replacement generation. So I think that's pretty obvious that that's how you would do it. There's not a good reason to do it other ways, but that is a difficult one to get past because it doesn't deal or endorse green energy. And we still have a strong pull for renewable energy. And there's nothing in the legislature that tells us that suggests that we want to do something otherwise. If you want to build renewable energy generation, that's fine, but there's not a strong drive here in the legislature to subsidize that. We want to let everything. It's the old-fashioned all of the above generation sources. That's fine as long as a source can compete on its own. Then we're all for it. That was an interesting discussion that we had briefly there about geothermal. Do have some, we'll call it exploration for that. So that's enticing. That's interesting thing. We also have a 2,000-acre lease up in the northeast part of the state for geologic hydrogen. So that's kind of out in the distance, but that's something that's also being explored on a national level. So there's plenty of opportunities here in Arizona to do that. Another one we talked about was nuclear. We also, again, are doing what we can with legislation to clear the path for implementation of small modular reactors. And that those may or may not get actually signed into law, but the legislature continues to identify opportunities to straighten the path to aid that when the utilities finally get the opportunity to invest in small nuclear modular reactors. So what else? One thing to keep in mind, again, on data centers, they and I heard a little bit of it in the short time I was on, is there's an aversion to building data centers, and most of that is not well founded. In fact, I've heard concerns about noise, and if you've ever been outside of a data center, there's not really noise. You can't tell the difference between it and a warehouse. Another one is causing my electric rates to go up because of the increased load on the system. And I think Kelly addressed that. Again, they're partners in all this, the Corporation Commission. They understand that it's not necessary to raise other people's electric rate because a new large user comes on the grid. Another one is it uses too much water. I don't know exactly where that comes from. I think generally that's a holdover from the old or the original data centers that were built in Virginia. Virginia is the #1 spot in the world for data centers. The reason was because they had a lot of available power and they had plenty of water, and they did not concern themselves with water efficiency. But it's easy to find a data center here in Arizona that doesn't really consume water in the heat removal for the data center. In fact, the greatest portion of their water usage is for their landscaping. So these are persistent concerns that are not well founded, but they nevertheless have the effect of impacting completions or beginning of data centers. One thing that we do need to do, quite a bit of the legislations that's put forward here deals with as long as certain circumstances exist, then we'd like to streamline that opportunity and for approval of construction of new generation. And that kind of has the effect of taking the local decision making out. So as I said on that bill I had, it requires to have a one-time meeting with the county to get approval and allow everyone to have the opportunity to express any concerns that may not have been identified prior. But that pretty much is limited from what would normally be the case for siting a brand new generating plant. So one thing that can help that is that local governments would help in the approval of these various things, data centers or generation stations or whatever. And I think generally that's what you see across the state, but it is a headwind coming from local folks for concerns about just about anything. It's commonly referred to as not in my backyard syndrome. So I think that's pretty much wraps up what we have here at the Capitol. I'd like to open it up for some specific questions if anybody would like, but basically speaking, this at this point is clearing the path to make it as straightforward as possible when the utilities are prepared to build new generation. So with that, I'd like to open it up for anyone that might have questions.
All right, fantastic. Well, so there's going to be a couple slides and a couple questions for this last one, but I'd like to introduce Russell Smolden with B3 Strategies and Craig McFarland, who's the president and CEO of Pinal Partnerships. So
my name is Craig McFarland. I'm the president and CEO of Pinal Partnership, and Pinal Partnership is a consortium of municipalities, utilities. We have Pinal County as a member, so it's a membership organization, nonprofit, but we deal with about 8 different topics, and one of those topics is energy. And so, pertinent to today's conversation, we and Representative Taylor hit it pretty succinctly, and that is that the NIMBYism and everything that's going on in the industry today is crippling in terms of trying to get zoning changes and all the things that are required of these entities to bring on more power for the state of Arizona. And so one of the things we recognized in our energy committee was that we needed to put something together to get good information, accurate information to our decision makers, which are the city councils, the planning and zoning commissions, and that goes for all the municipalities and the county. So we recognized that and worked with SRP, APS, even our electric districts. We worked with Southwest Gas, even Kinder Morgan, and really kind of put together this whole presentation. This is it's a 20-page presentation. I'd be happy to share it with you, Katie, if you want to share it with everybody. I can send it to you and you can send it out. And I'll send the slides that have all the talking points, because then you can see some of the back talk that's on each of the slides, because the slides themselves don't explain everything. But just to show kind of there's like 4 slides that I put here. Okay, so this is really the first page, and it's about meeting Arizona's energy challenges, and it's going to require close partnership between utilities, developers, local governments, and community. And that was the impetus for putting this together. And again, it's 20 pages, and I'm just going to show a couple. This is an SRP slide that really shows the different types of energy that are going to be needed for the future. It's an all above, and you heard this 3 times already today, but it's an all above approach to from nuclear to gas to solar to wind and hydro, battery storage, and we haven't really even touched on battery storage, but it's going to be an integral part of this whole process. Even the pumped hydro that was mentioned earlier. So this is just, and all the slides support this, and there's an APS slide, and basically these companies will have to double or triple their output in the next 10 years. And the only way that's going to happen is if we have an all above approach. Nuclear is 10 years away for even the small nuclear reactors. And so it's really going to be incumbent on us all to kind of work together to meet Arizona's needs. Again, partnership between utilities, developers, local governments, and the community. And so, and then we also talk about acknowledging the conflict and the conflicting information that's out there. So we go into the details here on how, especially in Pinal County, it's concentrated in the Eloy Coolidge area because that's where the transmission lines are. So the overemphasis in certain areas is causing backlash in the communities. And so, again, we talk about all that. We talk about how important the power is. Yes, gas is coming, but it's not until 2029. And SRP and APS are both exploring nuclear, and I'm talking large nuclear power plants, but some of that won't be even around until 2040 if they get going on it today. So there's things that we need to do today. So some of it's solar, some of it's nuclear, maybe it's the SMRs, hopefully coming sooner than 10 years. So I was interested in what Scott had to say in terms of that, and trying to make sure that, some of the conversation is that those are the answer, but some of them are small. They're 30 to 50 megawatts. Well, TSMC uses 1,200 megawatts. So how many of those can you stack in TSMC's backyard? So I think they're part of the solution. I don't think they're the answer, though. So that's kind of what we try and get out there and talk to folks about. That's my organization's goal, is to try and get out there and show people, what's available and how they can get involved. Because that's really what we're trying to do, is make sure we give good information to our councils, make sure we give them the data that they can actually talk back to some of these people who have misinformation, which is rampant out there. I think you heard it from the Representative Taylor. He was polite. He was just calling them not in my backyard. Well, we have other names for them as well, but it's really a challenge out there today. And I know anybody in this industry who's done anything in the public sector knows what kind of pressure is out there. So, Russell, I'll pass it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much, Craig. It's kind of exciting to be on the same panel with Craig. I was involved. When I was at SRP, we were involved in, had just gone down into Pinal County. We bought Desert Basin power plant. We were retrofitting it. We put together the new customer service facility over in Santan Valley area in Pinal County. And so the Pinal partnership was really important in SRP's first kind of voyage into Pinal County. And so we were building a 500 kV line through Pinal. We had substations galore. We had 69 kV line. It was crazy. So just as a background for me, I'm Russell Smolden. I have a little company called B3 Strategies. I worked for a congressman as an intern, and then out of college while I was going to law school. I left law school and went to work for a utility in Spokane, Washington, where they did gas and water and electricity. I spent almost 6 years there and lobbying in Idaho and Montana. And then I came down to Arizona, got recruited to work for SRP and run their government relations group. I did that for 26 years and then started my own company all those years ago. And so I've been in the Valley a long time. I care deeply about what's going on. When I came to SRP in 1987, we had 350,000 electric customers. Today, SRP has about 1.2 million electric customers. That tells you what we're dealing with here. There is no reason for any of this to slow down if we don't want it to. We just got to be smarter with the resources that we have. And so I also represent lots of folks in this space. I represent ED3 and MSIDD, Craig, and HOHOCOM in Pinal. I have all the Pinal districts are in the Arizona Municipal Power Users Group that I represent, along with the irrigational and electrical districts. So how did I come to be the representative of data centers today, you ask? Well, I'll tell you. In 2011, 2012, I was at SRP and we were looking for a way to replace all of the power that we had lost, all of the sales of electricity we had lost because of the Great Recession. You remember those days, there were entire strip malls that were vacant, big box stores that were abandoned, industrial parks that didn't have anything in them. We were desperate to try to figure out how do we sell more electricity, because in the utility business, it costs you about the same to run power to one person and it does to 100. The difference is you want to spread that cost out over the 100, so it's cheaper for everybody. So the goal was to figure out how to do that. And so in 2013, we introduced legislation that created this data center incentive program. The incentive is this: you get all the stuff inside the building, you get a sales tax exemption for either 10-year period or a 20-year period. If it's a 10-year period, it's because you didn't build to a sustainable Green Globe's Energy Star or LEED standards. If you do that and you spend $200 million, you can get a 20-year exemption from that sales tax. All the other businesses in Arizona get a sales tax exemption on their machinery and equipment. Everything outside of that pays taxes. So I'll give you an example. A 250 megawatt data center is going to pay about almost $2 million a year in sales taxes on their electricity that they purchase from the utility. That size of a data center typically will pay between $3.2 and $3.5 million a year in property taxes to local schools, to the city, to the county, to all the special districts. So they're a good thing from that perspective. I have some slides that I want to share with you all, but I thought it was important to explain. And when we first did this, it was for brownfield. So it was to try to redevelop areas that had development on it, but it was abandoned during the recession. In 2016, Microsoft came to town and said, hey, we want to build a big campus here. We can't find enough space in a brownfield. We'd like to open this up to greenfields. We increased the amount of spend that they had to do, and that then led to some of the greenfield expansions that we are currently experiencing in the data center world. Anyway, so I just want to talk generally about just kind of the overall drivers of the economy. I had another conversation with a legislator today and had to explain again. Data centers aren't in the cloud. I mean, that's just a saying that we use. They're actual physical structures. And every time, it just kills me every time somebody gets up on the floor of the House or the Senate and they give a speech using ChatGPT that ChatGPT wrote for them, blasting data centers. They're actually using a data center and using big servers within data centers to create all that content. So what I wanted to talk about just a little bit from a driver standpoint is the employment and the labor income associated with data centers, because I don't think people really understand the impact these have on our economy. If you even the governor, who is calling for a removal of the exemption, sales tax exemption for data center equipment, in the slide presentation of her budget had the two biggest contributing factors to the GDP in Arizona are semiconductor manufacturing and data centers. So they are driving the economy at the moment in Arizona at a time when we desperately need to drive the economy. So as you can see, there are 20,840 direct jobs in Arizona. That is as of 2024. That number has increased dramatically just in the last year. And you will see the 2025 numbers are significantly higher than that. There are 87,760 total employment contribution in 2024, 7.7 billion in total contribution to the labor income. These are not your temporary 6-month construction jobs. These things take multiple years to build out. So if you are an electrician or you're a carpenter and you got a job in a data center, that job's going to last multiple years. So those guys, the trades union guys, love these jobs. They are big paying jobs. As far as GDP and taxes, including direct and indirect and induced effects, the data center industry contributed $13.5 billion to the Arizona GDP in 2024. That's a 17% increase just since 23. The industry's total tax contribution is about $1 billion in 2024. And remember, everything outside just the equipment inside that data center is taxed. So all the construction, everything that goes into it, all that labor, everything is taxed. And then in total, data center industry directly or indirectly contributed $607 million in taxes to Arizona state government and $397 million to local governments. Here's a U.S. Bigger look at the U.S. Everybody is dealing with this issue now. So you can see there, we're talking about 1 million jobs, 5 million in total employment, 525.3 billion. That number is skyrocketing with the amount of issues going out there. There are a couple of reports that we can share with you if you'd like. Price Waterhouse did a report in 23 on the economic, environmental, and social impacts, and then there's an economic contributions of data centers report that they did. And the last slide I wanted to show was this user demand. This is interesting because in Arizona, we're a little different than most places. Most places are huge cloud markets, meaning cloud is this brown area here, the tan kind of area. So in Northern Virginia, it's mostly cloud. That means memory, right? So you're storing lots and lots of stuff. Technology is this kind of bluish color. If you look at Arizona, you see this really nice mix of stuff. So we have a big financial market, financial resource market. So Charles Schwab has its own data center. Edward Jones, Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America, all have their own data centers. If you look at the healthcare industry, which is another chunk of this, is the purple part here that's 5%. That's Blue Cross Blue Shield, that's Dignity. Did you know there's a 19,000 square foot data center in the basement at Park Central Mall? People didn't know that. The old Republic print shop, 4 stories on 121 East Van Buren. That's a 4-story data center right in the heart of downtown Phoenix. So you can see that we have lots of different pieces of that, of our economy represented in these data centers.
So, Russell, I know that you got some flack earlier about, how do you portray this in a better light for communities? How can people understand that, these things are not major water users, at least not to the point that they were 10 years ago? And Craig, I imagine you deal with some of this as well, both being on the private side of the industry. I think that you guys get beat up a little bit here, but what are some of the tactics that you're currently employing right now to better that flow of information and try to, I guess, change how the light is being shed on this particular type of developments?
Yeah. I'll just tell you, data center industry sucks at telling its own story. I mean, they're horrible. I've been screaming about it for years. I come from the utility side of the world. We spread love like peanut butter around the community. We get involved in stuff. We joined the Pinal Partnership. We are involved in all kinds of organizations, and we try to do all kinds of things in the community. And I've tried to explain to the data center folks who are not from here, they're all coming from other places. They're either national or international. They are big players on the world stage, but man, they don't do community relations very well. And so I think that they're getting the message. They're understanding that they need to do more in local communities. At least I'm praying that they do. And so, yeah, the water issue, don't believe me on water. Look at Sarah Porter at the Kyle Foundation over at ASU. She did a year-long study of water use from data centers. You will find there ain't much to it. I'll give you one perfect example. The Beal project in Marana uses 40 megawatts of water a year. 80% of that water use is for the landscaping outside the building. So we're talking about a commercial building kind of water use. And so once you create a closed loop system, water just isn't the issue. So what's the issue? Power, energy. That's the biggest problem. I put in the chat a while ago that their average household has 17 to 21 connected devices in their home. Every time those devices are used and interact in the internet, they're going through a data center. So I need people to understand that. The other thing that I want to say, and Kelly did a great job of explaining this from an APS standpoint, but a lot of this is made up. And I can't tell you how many people I've run into who were selling houses in Maricopa 6 months ago who are now data center developers. That I'm that I'm trying to tell people, okay, that project probably isn't real. And until they have an actual data center, because there's a development community and there's a data center community, and the two aren't always connected. Developers want to put together stuff so that the data centers will land on their stuff. And there's going to be a natural peak as to when this market kind of rises to, and that is how much energy is available going forward. And we cannot build the kind of resources necessary fast enough to meet the demand. So the demand will look for other places to go. Markets will solve 90% of these issues going forward. I'm sorry, Craig. I'll hog the whole thing if I'm allowed. So,
well, and Russell, let me pile on top of you here just for a second, because what's happened is you hit it, and so did Kelly, in terms of 90% of these data centers won't happen. And
right.
So how do you weed through the developer versus the data center? And that's where the community now gangs up on the developer, because that's who they're developed. That's who they're, and I see this all the time. I see it at least in Pinal County, where it's the developer who's building a site, and then they say, well, we're going to put a data center here. And then the community just loses their mind.
Right.
And you don't have anybody talking about really what the data center is about. And you just have a developer saying, well, I want to put a 300 megawatt, gas generating power plant here, and I want to put 2 data centers in here, and all the neighbors love it, but everybody else doesn't love it. And so it just happened here, the La Osa data center project down by, in south of Eloy.
Yeah.
And so it got tabled, fortunately, and not rejected by the supervisors, but that's happening. And somehow we've got to do better job of setting up the information. And that's kind of what my group's trying to do, but we're trying to do it on all the above energy basis, not focusing on data centers, not focusing on solar, but focusing on the need for energy and how does that impact our communities. And so hopefully we give that information to our P&Zs and our county supervisors, and I sent the presentation to Katie, and if she wants to share it with everybody, you're welcome to use it. Don't just send it out to all your forces, but use it judiciously and try and convince people that what the true story is, including the data information. In fact, Russell, if you'd send me those slides you have, I'll see if I can incorporate some of that into my presentation.
Yeah, you got it, Craig. Happy to do it.
So it's a difficult time right now, especially with all these special interest groups. We've got Sierra Club all over the place, and they hide in the background. The next thing you know, they're pouncing on you with 20 people showing up from Tucson to fight a project that's in northern Pinal County. And so it's really frustrating, especially for the development industry. But the developers got to get better. They have to get more informed, and they have to do a better job using your information, using my information, and really paint a better story instead of, hey, I'm just gobbling up a bunch of land and I'm going to try and flip it. I don't even know if I really have a data center or not. And that's what frustrates people.
The outside influences here are incredible. I mean, I don't know if you've seen some of the stuff going on, but this workers pack from California that, I mean, they went after Lucid, they went after Axon, they went after the Project Blue and the Marana project. I mean, they don't even live here.
No.
They had, on that Project Blue thing, they were busting people in from Austin and LA to object to that thing. So, and I know that there's a couple of billionaires in Europe, and the Chinese are very interested in spending money to make sure we do not progress in this area. I mean, that sounds a little conspiratorial, but I'm telling you, I just seen too much evidence to the contrary. So we need to do a better job of getting that message out to people, Craig. Absolutely.
And we need everybody's help. We need, business, industry. We need, people to show up that are positive about projects, not the negative about the projects.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, Arizona has one of the things that's kind of making me crazy at the moment, because the governor continues to push for this, getting rid of the exemption. There are 30 states that have a sales tax exemption on the equipment inside a data center. Remember, most of the stuff that goes through a data center is taxed at some point, right? So if you've got a Netflix, Hulu, Prime, Disney, all those guys, you're taxed on that retail purchase of whatever that streaming that comes to you from the data center, that endpoint when you watch it on TV. It's a subscription that you have. Digital services are subscribed to. There's a whole bunch of stuff, financial services, healthcare stuff, all that stuff you are going to pay taxes on at some point. So what we're trying to say is, look, there are better ways of doing this and growing this economy, because I don't know what's next. Right now, we're storing stuff in the cloud. AI will revolutionize what comes after that. The ability to do quantum, machine learning, and then robotics manufacturing are incredible. And Arizona, especially Pinal County, is laid out in a great situation where we can attract those kinds of jobs. But I am telling you, everybody needs electricity. Amcor, which is building in Peoria, will need it full build out, I think 120 megawatts. So I mean, you got 3 mines in Pinal County looking to open. I think the one of them is just 80 megawatts by itself. So it isn't just data centers. And the thing that drives it is the market. People continue to use these things as mini computers, and that will continue to drive the market. You want to stop data center development? Stop using your phone.
And then we actually have 4 mines, by the way.
4, okay.
So
I
there
lost
you go.
track of one.
They're all copper mines.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you, Craig and Russell, again, and thank you to all our speakers that were here today.